In the last 5 days, he has played 7 unbelievable quarters of football. And the numbers in these last 2 weeks, despite the loss against Denver, the QB are improving by 52 points. He's now only the second Bears quarterback ever to throw 4 touchdown passes in consecutive games. The other, no, it's not Sid Luckman. It was Jay Cutler. It was slightly more recent than that, but only slightly. All right, how in the world do we explain this? The Bears are the team that all of us, and by us, I certainly include myself, are piling on, making fun of, writing off, firing the coach, everything else, and they come out and they play an inspired game last night.
Well, they had their backs against the wall, and they came out and they played like the more desperate team, which is disappointing because when you think about the Commanders, they have an opportunity in a weak NFC to really be able to get one of those playoff spots. So it was disappointing at home. Usually the team traveling is the one that comes out lethargic and slow. But, you know, the road team came out, they punched Washington in the mouth, and they never recovered. And this kid is really playing well. And I might want to blame his slow start to the fact of how we set up preseason. You know, this team is getting good and trying to get that connection with DJ Moore. And he's showing us the quarterback that he's always been. You know, a quarterback that can throw it from the pocket. Last year we saw what he can do with his legs. Now he's blending it together.
The acquisition of DJ Moore, that was supposed to be the A.J. Brown to Jalen Hurts, supposed to be the Stephon Diggs to Josh Allen. Suddenly the last 2 weeks, it looks like it's supposed to look.
No, it does. We all knew that DJ Moore was an outstanding receiver, a guy that can, you know, be friendly to a quarterback. And, you know, they wanted a number one, and they got a true number one. You know, I don't know what this means for his future because they're going to find themselves in a tough dilemma when this season's over with. I mean, it's a win-win for them because his stock is continuing to rise. I just don't know if his future on this team is for long.
What do you think?
Well, Greeny, I think they made the decision in March, and it was validated the last 2 weeks. Over the last 2 weeks, he has 617 yards, 8 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. And when we talk about the Bears, it always goes back to the offensive line for me. Only Darnell Wright has played 100% of the snaps. So when you protect Justin Fields, this is what you're going to see. And as Graz mentioned, Greeny, DJ Moore is hugely consequential. He is a number 1 receiver. We saw that again last night. So if you could protect him, it's not going to be perfect. He's still young, but it's going in the right direction.
I got to give Graziano credit because all through what was about as bad a start as any NFL team has had, not just this year, but in recent memory, you keep telling me that the people you're hearing from Chicago say it may not look like it, but we're getting better. It's getting closer. It's coming. And so what is it they saw that the rest of us did not?
The last 2 games, I say the last 2 weeks, but it's really a 5-day stretch, right? They felt like the entire offensive operation was better around Justin Fields and that makes him a more confident player. And I think you see that. And you've got to tip your cap to this embattled coaching staff, right? I mean, can you imagine what it's like to lose 14 NFL games in a row? I mean, can you even imagine?
No.
Like, right. So, and people are talking about around the league, would Matt Eberflus get fired if they lost this game? I mean, that was really out there. So, like, they have nothing on the offensive line. They have nothing in the secondary, shredded by injuries. By the end of the game, they were out of running backs. Like all those 3 running backs got hurt in the game and couldn't come back in. So, and yet they still managed to play with more heart and more fire and more effort than the home team did last night. I just think whatever the future is, right, I think you have to really be impressed with the way they've come back from 0-3, 0-4 start.
Greeny, I love how they handled Chase Claypool. He stepped out of line. They held him accountable. That becomes a force multiplier in the locker room. There was a sense of urgency and accountability last night. Clearly, he's not part of their future. And when you give up essentially a first-round pick and move on from him, that shows the rest of the people, hey, there's a line, don't cross it.
And I think you saw a lot of what goes on with teams that aren't as good as some other teams, right? They came out on fire and heading into halftime. And then the second half, it kind of looked like it was getting away from them a little bit. And then major relief after the missed field goal. And then, of course, the long touchdown pass to DJ Moore. So, but they needed a win by any way they could possibly get it. Heartbreaking loss on Sunday, a game they felt like they should have won. But they bounced back 4 days later, and you got to give them credit.
And just want to be clear, for those who don't know what Mike is talking about, it's an important point. They traded essentially a first-round pick for Chase Claypool during last season. I say that because it was the first pick of the second round, but because there was a vacated pick in round 1, it was the 32nd pick in the draft. So when you do that, a lot of general managers, and you know this personally, will do anything they can to try and validate the trade. They did the opposite. The guy steps out of line, boom, boom. They basically wash their hands of him, sends a message to everybody else. I don't know if that played a role in what happened last night, but it certainly didn't hurt.
Well, absolutely. You're holding people accountable. They're saying if they can cut him, it's probably about 40 other players that's less decorated than him, that they gave up, less, resources for. So what it tells you is like stepping, if you step out of line, if they're going down, they're going to go down their way. So, when you lose, we know that there are always going to be changes. It's already 35% turnover rate in the NFL pretty much every year when you talk about rosters and the turnover. But that's why they brought DJ Moore in, to be the difference maker, right? To be that guy that, when we feel like, okay, we had a tough third quarter, here we go again, which all bad teams feel when you start losing and teams start coming back. He said, not today. We won't be denied.
And I draw everyone's attention to the bottom of your screen. The next few weeks, those are winnable games. They're gettable defenses. I feel like that's a phrase that you used in the meeting this morning. I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, are the Bears going to make the playoffs? Let's take baby steps. But certainly, the most important question there is going to be the development of Fields. And maybe those are some defenses he can play well against.
Absolutely. Listen, we saw him play at a high level last year, but we know that the style of play wasn't sustainable. When you look at that last one, how ironic the Panthers are there because they have that pick so they can help themselves, right? And it's going to be a tough decision, right? Because this reminds me of the same situation that the Jets found themselves in, right? They thought, okay, we have to make a major decision in a year or so on a franchise quarterback. Do we give him $50 million when you know that it's 2 franchise quarterbacks, maybe 3 coming out in the draft? Do you reset the money? But it's win-win. If he plays well, then you get more for him. If not, you reset it and you get a franchise quarterback, considering that you may have 2 top 5 picks.
Greeny, if I'm a Bear fan, where I get excited? If we hit on Justin Fields, which is reasonable, and you're sitting there with Carolina's top 3 pick, and that could be Marvin Harrison Jr. Now all of a sudden you got DJ Moore and Morrison. That's exciting.
If you have 2 of them, and you can also trade out of one of them if you want to. They traded back last year. We'll see if that winds up bearing fruit. We'll see what it turns into this season.
Yeah.
Did you see what Magic Johnson tweeted last night? People sometimes joke around about how Magic's tweets are, listen, he is a part owner of the Washington Commanders. And he tweeted, tonight we played with no intensity or fire. We didn't compete in the first half, got down 27-3. It was too big a hole to climb out of. That is why we ended up losing 40-20. What do we make of that, Danny?
There is kind of a chat GPT element to Magic's tweets, right? I mean, like that does read a little bit like that. But look, I mean, you talk about was Matt Eberflus in trouble if they lost this game. Matt Eberflus, like the same family has owned that team for 100 years. There's a new ownership group in Washington, right, that has no loyalty to Ron Rivera. Like, I'm not saying he's getting in trouble this week, but you get to the end of this year, and if they've had a disappointing year, absolutely a new owner could clean house there. There's no question about it.
Greeny, I promise you, I've been with organizations with new ownership. Everybody in that building and their families are talking about that tweet this weekend. 100% that becomes a story inside the building.
Well, look, it's been a tough 5 days for Riverboat Ron, who is clearly not Riverboat Ron anymore. Not going for the 2 last week, and then last night kicking that field goal in that spot. It doesn't wind up going in. Well, he's no longer Riverboat. He's like life jacket Ron now. Kayak Ron, canoe Ron. Some other much less different kind of boat than a Riverboat Ron.
But the team goes and stops and goes as the quarterback, and you can't let your quarterback get hit that many times. He was a great story early on, but now kind of like the bloom is off the rose, so to speak. They have to figure out how they can protect this kid, because they have an opportunity in a weak NFC to be able to make some noise and be able to make it to the playoffs. And with that supposedly front 4 in that defense, they're supposed to be able to be much better than that. It's disappointing when they had an opportunity, winnable game. You have to beat the team that you're supposed to beat and split with the good teams. That's usually the mathematics for trying to make it to the postseason.
So that's a rough time for them.